T-minus 15 seconds. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. We have main engine start. 4, 3, 2, 1, and liftoff. Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it is cleared to tower.
A formal board will be established by the acting administrator very, very shortly. Subsequent reports on this tragedy will be made by this formal review board. I am aware and have seen the media is showing footage of the launch today from the NASA Select system. We will not speculate as to the specific cause of the explosion based on that footage. It will take all the data, careful review of that data, before we can draw any conclusions on this national tragedy. Thank you.
Excuse me, just for the television people, is it necessary to have the lights on so bright? It's really intolerably hot here. Any way to turn them down a little bit? It really is, must be 100 degrees.
General Katina, I am going to get to your to your summary. If you will allow me, I would like to give a little precursor to that I think leads in to how we dealt with those data relative to 51L. And as Mr. Moore has mentioned, we do have a very thorough pre-flight review process. For the solid rocket booster, that pre-flight review process starts with the recovery of the hardware from the last flight, because we're very sensitive to anything that we see on the last flight that might pose a consideration that we should have for the flight readiness of the next one. So we've had that opportunity to go back and do a detailed examination of the hardware from the previous flight prior to committing to the next one. The key thing in our flight readiness review is that previous flight performance. We look at the ballistic performance of the motor, and then particularly any problems from the previous flight. Now, we have not had in the solid rocket motor, in terms of ascent performance, we have had no anomalies related to ascent performance in the motor. What we have seen on recovering the hardware are some things that would indicate that there are some improvements that could be made in the design to provide more margin. And the particular point of interest here is the case joints and the nozzle joints, and particularly the erosion of the O-ring seals. So we have dealt with that.
Get my hand right here.
Look at the hand, yes. Hello, hand.
And then rotate your
nice
body.
little hand.
Rotate your body. Just Right there, perfect.
Okay.
And you just go look out there.
Do I have the heroic, long looker face on? Right?
Yes.
Then I can't be smirking and smiling, right?
This is your optimistic pondering shot. Thinking about a new world.
Think of all the great stuff we could do. It'll be great. Wonderful. Fantastic. Of course, the future is high. It's up in the sky, right? It's not down below. Or is that...
Do you recall what the issue was with the Challenger?
Yeah, so famously, Richard Feynman was on the committee that looked into it, and he did this famous demonstration where he took a piece of plastic that was supposed to be one of the joints that prevented gas from escaping, and he put it in ice water, which was there on the table, and it solidified and was no longer plastic, which if it's no longer plastic on the actual rocket means it's going to have gaps and less. But stuff escaped, which it did, and that's what blew it up, basically. They launched when it was too cold to launch. Apparently, many people knew, hey, this looks pretty cold, we should wait and not launch when it's this cold, and they pushed to launch anyway. And the risk of the launch was that, in fact, the rubber seal became too rigid in the cold to seal.
That was Richard Feynman, the Nobel Prize-winning physicist who startled the commission months ago when he dipped an O-ring into his glass of ice water to show that it wouldn't work when it was cold.
I took this stuff that I got out of your seal, and I put it in ice water. And I discovered that when you put some pressure on it for a while and then undo it, it maintains, it doesn't stretch back, it stays the same dimension. In other words, for a few seconds at least, and more seconds than that, there's no resilience in this particular material when it's at a temperature of 32 degrees. I believe that has some significance for our problem.
In 1986, I would have been 1 year into working at the AI Center at Lockheed. That would have been when the Challenger accident happened. I would, of course, heard about it, and I was in the aerospace industry, so I guess it would be seen as closer to the industry, but it's famously an example where stock market prices were informative about a key public policy question, because when the Challenger space shuttle blew up, the question was, whose fault was that?
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States and Mr. William Rogers.
Always necessarily a bad thing, right?
No, not at all. It's what makes it go, and that's why it worked okay with the Apollo. But then when they had this other project, which is, so to speak, impossible from an engineering point of view, it's unrealistic. They don't want to hear what happens. It just goes up, and each level in a bureaucracy kind of understands what it's supposed to do. Keep it from the other guys, but they don't have to hear it. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear it because it would be uncomfortable to be going and saying we're going to do 60 flights a year. On just that morning, they were told that it's impossible. That's with theory. Now, as you know, I'm a professor of physics and not of management and human relations, and so it's very likely not right, but you asked me for my theory.
There's a lot of pressure from the president to be able to push these initiatives forwards with NASA. There was a lot of pushback from engineers at NASA about the speed at which everything was going and the problems that they were identifying. Ultimately, it was a decision that was made to go forward, even though that there was protest within NASA. Morton Thiokol was the manufacturer of the O-rings that were on the space shuttle. And ultimately, through NASA's analysis, that was determined to be the root cause problem with what resulted in the Space Shuttle Challenger exploding right after liftoff. And because that's a publicly traded company, people had that information, and that was reflected in the stock price. And within 16 minutes, all of the stock prices of all of the contractors went down. Morton Thiokol's was lower than everybody else's. And that would be, in retrospect, a good indicator to say this is identified as the problem.
Markets are an unstoppable force that society, humanity has created, and it explains a lot about humans, but it's also, a blunt instrument that exists out there. For example, if your family member dies tomorrow, it is a tragic event for you. Time slows down for you, but there's still people driving their cars to work, doing everything normal. Like, that's the ebb and flow of life, and I think markets are just a reflection of that.
Markets are very good aggregators of information, especially speculative markets, and this is a fact that most people don't quite realize. So in our world, we have many institutions that aggregate information. We have polls, we have newspapers, we have academic journals, we have presidential commissions, we have, boards of, engineers together. Our world has many places where people come together to create a consensus estimate on something, an issue. And each time they do that, they use a different institution to do that, a different way in which the people come together to produce their consensus. In some parts of the world, we have speculative markets, and that's a place where there's a question the market is asking, and then traders come in and trade, move the price up and down, and that's another mechanism by which people come together to aggregate information. It turns out when you compare these mechanisms and try to have a similar question and a similar number of people of similar quality with similar resources who use that mechanism to aggregate information, speculative markets are just the best by a substantial margin. They just do a great job of aggregating information into an estimate, which then raises the question, well, why don't we use that elsewhere more? All the other places we're aggregating information, why don't we use speculative markets? And that was the dream that initially inspired me to focus on prediction markets. Yeah, look how great this thing is. Let's use it elsewhere.
We talked about 2008 housing collapse. We've talked about the Great Depression. We've talked about recession, obsession with, is the Fed going to cut rates? What's inflation? What's my gas price? What's corn prices? All of this stuff. People deal with the realities of markets daily, right? You go in, hey, eggs are way more expensive than I recognize, or hey, this pack of chips is smaller and still more expensive. So, is that reality already here as far as the influence of markets over our lives? I'd argue yes. Now, how do we use that, leverage it to the maximum? That's not here, but we're running that experiment today, and we hope to see what that... We believe it's a marked improvement from where we are. So that's what we believe, that's what we want to bring to the world. And if we can prove that out, then it's an improvement, so that's great.
It's strange because at the very beginning of this commission meetings, I remember Mr. Rogers saying, well, of course, we may never find out what made the accident occur. And that turned out, that's what I meant was easy.
I say, you know what happened.
We know what happened. Now, what was difficult, and I think maybe he's referring to this, was the discovery of these weaknesses inside of NASA and their attitudes, and this kind of illogic about safety and so forth, which was so extensive from an organization which had such a reputation in the country that it was hard for us to find it out in a sort of emotional way, as to have to come around and say that the Wizard of Oz, which everybody respects, has nothing behind it.